that the previous government hid the true picture of Manitoba's books, and our administration is dealing with those inherited challenges. Today I'm releasing the third quarter report, which lays bare the scale of the previous government's budgetary failures. The deficit is now projected at nearly $2 billion. It is the worst ever non-pandemic deficit in Manitoba's history. Total revenues are now projected to be $901 million below budget, while expenses have increased significantly. This increase in expense is largely attributable to significant and unbudgeted, that's a key part here, overspending in the healthcare bureaucracy. Since the second quarter update, the deficit has increased to $1.997 billion from $1.634 billion. This incremental increase reflects additional healthcare expenditures and provisions for the settlement of long-standing lawsuits. I want to be clear that the increases in healthcare expense were spurred by decisions made by the previous government, but were unbudgeted. They were not accounted for in Budget 2023. And they were not accounted for in the first quarterly update as we headed into the election, as we've discussed previously here in this room. As a result of this healthcare overspending, the government has launched a forensic audit of the Northern Regional Health Authority, and we will be launching comprehensive financial audits at Shared Health, as well as Winnipeg, Interlake Eastern, and Prairie Mountain Regional Health Authorities. These audits will review budgeting and spending practices to ensure that every single dollar that flows will deliver real results for Manitobans. We need to do things differently. We need to budget differently than the previous government. On April 2nd, I will deliver this government's first budget. It will close the chapter on the previous government's budgetary track record and start a new chapter where we will deliver real results for Manitobans. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
A lot of the changes seem to be compared to the last fiscal update. Seem to be on the revenue side. Taxation, tax revenues, et cetera, are down. Is that a sign of a weak economy? I'm looking at about $200 million in less revenue than the last fiscal update.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, the biggest drivers that have led to this increase in the scope of the deficit are tied to increases in healthcare expenditures that are mostly driven by collective bargaining related costs. So you'll see from the last quarterly update, there's approximately a $330 million increase in healthcare expenditures, again, mostly driven by unbudgeted collective bargaining costs. So there was a flurry of very last-minute collective bargaining agreements that were put in place prior to us arriving to government. The impacts of those collective bargaining agreements are now coming online. And the fact is, the previous government did not budget adequately for those agreements, and the impact of those agreements are starting to become fully apparent to us here, and that's really the biggest driver. The other piece here is, again, a further worsening of the situation at Hydro. We know that, as we reported in Q2, there was a significant variance from what had been projected in the budget on Hydro profits for their net income. This Q3 update reflects that situation has gotten even worse. And one thing, again, I want to highlight here is that we know that when the previous government reported the directionality of those hydro profits, they did not adequately reflect the reality of the situation. And they did that very intentionally because they wanted to hide the reality of the direction of hydro profits to create an impression that things were better than they were prior to the election. That's wrong. We need to be transparent with Manitobans, and that's why we're here today, to give more clarity on the financial picture.
Can you talk a little bit more about the lawsuits? There's Justice and Families and add up to $230 million, somewhat, $223 million. The variance in both departments it's under major expenses, is mainly due to provisions for the settlement of long-standing lawsuits. Are those the child special allowance dollars flowing, or?
I'm sure more information about those will come forward in due course. For now, we can say that there were significant costs associated with some settlements that, again, were not budgeted for properly, and that is reflected in the number we're sharing today.
Sorry, why can't you tell us what those lawsuits are? It's in the report.
Yeah, no, well, we are being clear that there are cost impacts associated with those lawsuits, but today we're not going to be focused on the nature of those. There are, as government, significant number of lawsuits that have been brought, of course, to the provincial government. These are two that were not budgeted for properly, and that we're here today to talk about as having had an impact. Again, the last government did not properly prepare or budget for those costs, and that's why we're seeing this, again, that's driving some of this deficit increase that we're seeing here today.
So it's two lawsuits in the fiscal year that ends with 2 weeks, but you can't tell us which lawsuits?
That information will come forward in due course.
But the settlements, there are settlements, like they've happened. The settlements are done.
Yeah.
Just, we're not getting.
I don't know, why can't you tell us?
Well, again,
Part of the report. You're saying it's a big cause of the deficit that we have. What are the lawsuits?
yeah, again, that information, I'm sure in time, you folks will be able to dig into that more, and more will come forward. Today, what we're bringing forward is this clarity that our deficit has expanded, tied to poor budgeting decisions by the last government.
The fuel tax holiday adds a little bit to the deficit in the current fiscal year, and perhaps more next year, depending on when it ends. The Premier seemed to indicate in question period yesterday that the fuel tax will never return to 14 cents a litre. Is that true? Have you made a decision as to whether to extend the tax holiday?
We made a commitment to a 6-month holiday, which we're delivering on, and delivering those savings for Manitobans. In terms of the decision of how we'll move forward, that information will come at a later date.
And is it true that the fuel tax will never return to 14 cents a litre?
Well, again, what I can say is that we made that important commitment because we know Manitobans have been struggling with serious affordability challenges. Right out of the gate, when we got into the legislature, one of the first things we did was focus on bringing savings to Manitobans. And as we know, January 1st, Manitobans started to get that benefit. We committed to a 6-month timeline. And as we committed, we will be sharing more as we get closer to that date as to how we'll proceed.
Does it make fiscal sense to continue that tax cut given the largest deficit outside of the pandemic?
Yeah, well, one thing we spoke about when we did our Q2 update was that as it related to that first chunk for this particular fiscal year of costs associated with that fuel tax rebate, we made offsetting decisions that helped to ensure that that wasn't going to impact or worsen the deficit. I think that showed our approach to fiscal responsibility. But at the same time here, we made important commitments to making life more affordable for Manitobans. And that's a key piece of that. And I'm proud to say that we are going to be able to do that while we work on developing a clear path to balance.
Given the numbers we have here, what can we expect out of the budget? Because it doesn't look like we have a lot of money to spend as a province.
Yeah.
It's a very important question. What we see here is a function, again, of a budget that was developed irresponsibly, that did not fully reflect the costs that Manitobans could have expected to see come online this year. What Manitobans can expect from us is something very different. Transparency and clarity over what we expect to be the cost that we'll be facing next year. I think we are going to be showing Manitobans that we can both make the investments in the things that they want to see us invest in as a new government, namely healthcare and affordability, while we show a path to balance. That's what Manitobans can expect.
We've got significant financial pressures still.
We do.
Should Manitobans anticipate that, there'll be some tough decisions? Could there be tax increases in certain areas?
Yeah, well, again, what we can what Manitobans can expect is that our government will show that we can balance the need to invest in priority areas while we balance, while we find that path to balance. That's the work that we're doing. And on April 2nd, I'm looking forward to sharing more about how we're going to do that.
Will Manitobans be happy with the budget?
I think Manitobans are going to be very happy with the budget we're bringing forward on April 2nd.
So there's low unemployment, low inflation, the lowest in Canada. Why is the GDP growth lower than anticipated? Like, what's missing? Is it still interest rates? I don't know. Why are you not so bullish on GDP growth?
I think our economy is still dealing with the impacts of really high interest rates. There's no question, and that's not just an issue here in Manitoba. That's an issue across the country. But I think the economic forecast suggests that 2024 we're going to see some modest growth, and then we're going to see more growth in 2025. And as a new government, we're going to do everything we can to make sure we foster and enable that growth in the best way possible.
Can we flip to Zoom real quick? Can you just say that?
Going to folks on Zoom.
Thank you, Minister. We have one question from one reporter today, so I'll turn it over to Colin Slark from the Brandon Sun.
Hi, Colin.
Hi, Minister Sala. I see that you've ordered a forensic audit for the Northern Health Region and a comprehensive audit for other regions, including Prairie Mountain Health. Can you explain the difference between the different audits you're ordering, the different levels here?
Sure, I appreciate the question. So the forensic audit will be at a somewhat deeper level than the other audits that have been proposed. These audits are important because we know that Manitobans want to see value for our healthcare spending. We've seen healthcare spending go up in recent years, but we're not necessarily seeing better outcomes. So I think these audits demonstrate that we are concerned about the direction of health spending and that we want to see action to remedy that, and that it's not acceptable to see these increasing costs go up without better outcomes for Manitobans. So I think these audits will help to deliver that, and essentially that's the focus here. These audits are focused on helping to deliver better healthcare for Manitobans.
Thank you. My follow-up is I'm looking at the page in the update summarizing changes to revenue, and I noticed that Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries is a bit of an outlier in that you're projecting a $52 million increase in revenue over budgeted. What is causing that greater than expected revenue from MBLL?
Appreciate that question, Colin. I think we can follow up offline with the details of what's driving that positive variance. Of course, good news here in a way. We'll provide more details offline.
Thank you, Minister.